Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. You are at Virtual Book Club. It's the book club they're all talking about, and you can join even if you've not read the book. VBC started in October 2020 in Zoom, and now it's a live event where professionals gather to talk about the books we read or want to read. We focus on business, leadership, and self development. Who doesn't want to be a better human? I'm joined today by Hal Guerin, Leslie Nidick, Rob Berry, Bobby Lee, and Apple Bedford.
Oh, what else?
How's it going?
Another day, another
Fantastic.
dollar.
Yeah, that's true. Another day, another dollar.
I want to answer your question, Benita, if I could.
Yes, please.
Yeah, who wants to be a better human? Who doesn't want to be a better human? Probably any AI developed product
Right.
because they clearly
Good one.
want to not be human.
Right. Good answer. Good answer.
Very good answer.
Yeah, I was just thinking I want to be referred to as a human.
Yeah. We don't know if it's AI Rob or if it's real Rob here, but
It's hard to tell sometimes.
yeah, so Culture Code. The Secrets of Highly Successful Groups by Daniel Coyle. Hal, I gotta tell you, in chapters 7 to 12, I was kind of thinking the same as like too many stories, not enough, like nuggets. But I mean, they were good stories. Like, what does a SEAL team, a troop of jewelry robbers, and successful band of comedians have in common? Like that got me. That got me. Um,
That sounds like the start of a bad joke.
right?
What does a SEAL team?
does.
A troop
Did
of-
they all go into a bar?
No, but he talked about like chemistry between these teams. And so the SEAL team had like a log, like a 250-pound log that the whole team would, like 8 of the members would hold, and then they'd go about their like daily activities, but holding this log. And you had to be like really dialed in because one slip from one member could mean like you dropped the log, right? And then the jewelry heisters were like a group of people that nobody knew who they were, but they performed like jewelry heists in Europe, and it'd be like a smash and grab, and they do it with so much like precision and coordination that was uncommunicative. Like they didn't say anything to each other. Went in, did the smash, was out in 45 seconds, and like got away with as much as $1 billion or $1 million, $100 million in one heist. And then the comedians, which you may know of, one of them was the group that was had Amy Poehler as part of it. They do these exercises known as the Herald. I never knew about this. I have a new appreciation for Seinfeld now that I like stand-up comedy and improv. Now that I know like how much trust it takes to
Yes.
support each other, and like you guys do here on book club, like all the time. It just sometimes it just dives, and you guys are able to help me pull the nose up. and support. So I just thought that was kind of cool. But all in all, these chapters made me think, do I really want to continue reading this book? And I was like, yeah, I felt like Hal. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening to me. Because it doesn't happen to me often, right?
No, you usually disagree with me on my
I do.
take on a book. So
I do. So
Well, I
I don't
declared
know.
last week I wasn't reading it based on some of the things that Hal was saying. I didn't feel drawn to it, so I just decided I'm not reading it. I can still contribute.
Right, absolutely. You don't have to read to come to the book club. Like, is anyone else reading it, or do we need to go? Should we give you some context to like bite on?
I'm listening
Wow.
to it like my good cousin recommended.
I love your cousin.
Yeah, I mean, listening to it, it's somewhat entertaining, but I do think that it does kind of become repetitive and drone on a little bit, but I still like it. But I think listening to it is different from reading it, though. If I were reading it, I probably would have the same feeling you all have. But
Oh,
you pop
that
it in when
reason.
you're going for a walk, and the stories actually entertain you along the way. So
that's what I would
I
have
agree
thought.
because I've been listening to it at the gym, and the stories are extremely entertaining actually hearing them. But if I was sitting down to read it, I'd probably have a different opinion.
That's the difference of having a physical book. You can it's easier to kind of jump ahead and skim. Now granted, you could put it on faster play if you're listening to it 1.5x or 2x or something like that, and you can get listen to the chipmunks and speed through it. But when you're looking at the book, to me, I can just kind of go, okay, where's this going? Where's this going?
Right. So yeah, this one I think we can all agree was better if you could listen to it. Um, did you like what he had to say about vulnerability? Like how he described it? Because I thought, oh no, this is going to be like a Brene Brown type of explanation.
I
And
thought you
like,
would say, oh yay, it's going to be like a Brene Brown thing, not oh
well, I feel like only
no.
Brene Brown can do Brene Brown.
That
Good
is
point.
that I would agree with.
Right. And so he starts it off with like, you probably think that vulnerability is going to be like a touchy feely thing, but it's not. And then he described like the Navy SEALs, and then this group of comedians, and they each had like a different take on what this chemistry, the vulnerability and chemistry, did to um, build trust among these very diverse groups.
Yeah, you think back to successful groups that you've been in, work and not work. And I was reading through this, what struck me is, that yes, there has to be vulnerability because you have to get your egos all out of the way. You have to be humble in knowing what you're good at and what you're not, and what others are better at than you are, and that takes vulnerability, and if you're not going to be vulnerable, then your ego starts getting in your way, and you're not collaborating, and you're not knowing when to stand down and when to let other people talk and when you need to shut up and all that stuff. And it's all about that chemistry.
Yeah, I like that chemistry, like seeing that chemistry in action. When I find a group that seems to have that chemistry, like I just want to stick around because it's fun to watch and be a part of. Okay, so this is that section I was talking about. It's about people tend to think of vulnerability in a touchy feely way, but that's not what's happening, Polzer says. It's about sending a really clear signal that you have weaknesses, that you could use help, and if behavior becomes a model for others, then you can set the insecurities aside and get to work, start to trust each other and help each other. If you never had that vulnerable moment, on the other hand, then people will try to cover up their weaknesses, and every little micro task becomes a place where insecurities manifest themselves. Um, and then this was interesting, and this is something I hadn't really thought about, even after reading all those Brene Brown books, is Polzer points out that vulnerability is less about the sender than the receiver. The second person is the key, he says. Do they pick it up and reveal their own weaknesses, or do they cover up and pretend they don't have any? I was like, wow. Like, I got a little bit further on, like, vulnerability is such a buzzword out there, but in this book, I got a little bit further on how to grasp the concept. The sender
So isn't it like it's a part? I don't even know if it's separate. It's like a partnership.
Yes.
Right?
Takes both.
Yes.
An example that comes to mind when you were, giving the seals and the various examples is if has any of you ever watched the show Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And improv comedy like that is a perfect example of how this works. It's funny and it's entertaining because I sit there and watch, how did they come up with that? But if you watch more closely, when you see one sort of pause, one of the comedians is they're improving their way through something, the other one steps in. And they know when to step back, when to take the lead, when to do it. And it's improv, it's on the fly, and if you haven't watched it or watched it recently, I find it as a fascinating example of what we're talking about here in action.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of people think vulnerability means that you cry and complain to everyone. And when I see that, I run from those kind of people because you're right. It's about knowing what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are and being able to communicate both openly and honestly. Because if you do that, then you can start building a better team, whether at work or in life, because people will people will naturally gravitate to help you with things that are your weaknesses if they know what they are. Now, those are people that you can trust, and that's why you can't be necessarily vulnerable with everyone. But like if you notice, I remember when I used to watch my grandmother and my grandfather, they were the weirdest thing I'd ever seen until I realized what they were doing. So every morning she would get up and she had this standard routine where she would make me get up and go get water from the pump and go and chop wood. And then I would be off doing my own thing. She would be off doing her own thing and he would be off doing his own thing. And then around 11:30, 10:30 or 11 o'clock, we'd all come together and we would like eat, but everything was just done because everybody knew what they were supposed to do. Now they knew. Now here was the kicker though. So I could chop the wood, but I couldn't carry it, and I was a kid. Now that didn't make sense. I was wielding an axe, but it was too heavy for me, so I would just leave it there. And the next thing you know, my uncle would get it, and it would just appear in the house. It took me months before I realized what happened to the wood after I finished chopping it. But everybody knew what the strengths and weaknesses were, and they just came together and just made it happen. Because see, my back then, my grandmother, when I was a kid, they had no indoor plumbing in their house. So everything had to be done like literally the old fashioned way, as they say. So we didn't have a refrigerator. We didn't have running water in the house. So you got everything from the land. And if one person messed up, you didn't eat that day.
It's incredible.
Good
But
story.
it's like a well-oiled machine. It's just
Yeah, until I messed it
everyone
up.
knows what cog they are in the.
Yeah.
I like it. I like that example.
But I think and part of all of that too is, with what we're, the examples we're talking about is ego gets set aside, because ego gets in the way and it starts becoming a competition, of, well, that's great, Rob, but let me tell you my story,
Right.
as opposed to, no, that's a great story, and accepting that, and you think of that dynamic in groups. People want to demonstrate, and when people want to demonstrate to everybody else how they're the expert in the room, you can't have a room full of experts on every single topic, and the group dynamics fail. So it is being vulnerable in a way where like we're talking about, what you're good at, what you're not, and you learn how to value and recognize, and value is the important piece there. I think, the strengths that the others bring to the table, so that you can be a cohesive work group or
Well,
And
that's
that's
so
why improv training really helps teams.
yeah, yeah. Because
I
I
took
think
a
that's what the leader does, right? The good leader recognizes everybody's strengths and weaknesses and then uses them accordingly. The leader is not the person that's necessarily telling everybody you do this, you do that. The leader is the best matchmaker. You'll be good at this, you'll be good at that, and putting it all together and coordinating, which means you're not necessarily the smartest person in the room. I think most leaders are smart at reading other people and putting pieces of a puzzle together. Those are the good leaders.
Yes.
Again, I know some people hate him, and I always bring up his name, but Steve Jobs, love him or hate him, when you hear this man talk, he talks about using his team to do things that he wants to get done.
Yeah.
What? Look at the results.
I saw an opera on the Revolution of Steve Jobs this weekend.
Wow.
I did.
Ah.
Totally offside comment. Leslie, you were gonna elaborate on like the importance of an improv team.
Yeah. I mean, everything they do, there's a reason why, like, improv training and workshops within corporate America and large organizations is actually popular, because how they teach vulnerability and really working with a team, and there is no star. It is that, like, handoff, and trusting that when someone kind of pushes the handoff, that, all right, I'll go with it. And you have to trust that and just let it go. And that's why they have no idea what's coming next, but they just trust that it's going to work.
So I took a course at Second City in Toronto
Oh,
years ago, and I did it because I'm an introvert, and you had to be vulnerable. The whole concept of yes and is so
yes.
powerful, and you allow people to pick up where you left off. We did a lot of skits and stuff. You never know how things would turn out, and that's a vulnerable piece, but you trust that the process works.
Yes.
I don't know what that is, Avel.
You don't know what is.
The two something course.
Oh,
Okay.
Second
It's
City.
yeah, it's
Oh,
improv
Second City.
Oh,
at Second City. Yeah. So Amy Poehler and all those people are talking about, they were part of the Second City troupe, and a lot of them end up being on Saturday Night Live. They
yes.
also read. They also Second City wrote an excellent book, and it's called Yes, comma and.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I might want to read that book.
yeah.
Not for a book club book,
No,
but
it's a good book.
right. Well, there's some ideas of action at the end of every section. So the first skill that you need to have to build successful teams, groups, was building safety. It's the second skill was having vulnerability, sharing vulnerability. And then next week we're going to go into the third. Um, I'll give you a little cliffhanger there. Um, so the ideas for action include on 159 included, and if you want to talk about one of these, just like interject while I go down the list. Make sure the leader is vulnerable first and often. Over communicate expectations. Deliver the negative stuff in person. When forming new groups, did somebody have something there? When forming new groups, focus on two critical moments. Listen like a trampoline.
I would go back just real quick when the two critical moments, if you haven't gotten to that part, reading, listening, or you haven't, or not know what that is. The two critical moments he's talking about when forming groups is the first. They're coming to take somebody away there. Um, Two critical moments.
I thought you
It's
said
the
give us
first
a time bomber
vulnerability.
moment.
And so the first vulnerability that the group experiences and the first disagreement. And those are the two critical moments, because how the group reacts and handles that first time of vulnerability and that first disagreement sets the tone for the rest of how that group is going to work together. And as a leader, when you're forming that group, you have to be what he's pointing out is you have to be attuned to both of those instances and really help facilitate the group through it.
That makes sense.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Benita, I didn't mean to break your flow there, but I thought
No, absolutely.
that was
Well,
important.
two things happened there. I heard that like plane, and it sounded like it was like dive bombing.
It was another balloon coming down.
And then as you were talking about it, I was like, oh, this is like what Leslie does. I mean, the conflict strategist, is it born from?
I get, yeah, some of this, it definitely intersects, especially with the issue of how you handle like that first vulnerability or first disagreement, because it sets the framework. Can it be corrected if it's not done well? Yes. Usually it takes some real intention and effort to figure that out. But if a leader can identify when it first happens and address it and set the tone and make it whatever they do, it has to make it clear that everyone feels safe to speak up, because that's really when the team doesn't work, where people think everyone's speaking up but they're really not speaking up. They're not. You don't want to have it where they don't ask questions when they really have one, because a lot of times when one person has a question, others do, or if they have a doubt. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the work other people are doing. It just means, hey, if they have that question, other people are going to have it.
Right.
Um,
Well,
but so many won't ask the questions that they have in their mind, and so the leader has to figure out how to make it clear. You can't just say, please speak up. It
yeah.
doesn't happen.
Well, in the moment of argument, that is an extremely important moment to nip it in the bud. I don't know if you remember Andy Griffith and Barney Fife. He would always talk about nipping stuff in the bud, called himself a bud
Yes.
nipper. That was a hard lesson for me because I think you get so busy, and when somebody acts up one time, you think to yourself, surely they aren't that crazy. Maybe they're just having a bad day, and you just kind of let it go. And I would say 8 times out of 10, that usually is the case. But those 2 times out of 10 can actually ruin an entire group dynamic if you don't just simply
Absolutely.
address it. And I learned that lesson early and in the middle of my career, because sometimes you just don't have time, or you think you don't have time to address what you deem to be foolishness, but you really do, because you never know if it's that 2 out of 10 time where somebody really exhibits that behavior, and by you ignoring it, you have set the tone for your entire group. And yeah, I just remember one time I let that happen, and without knowing. And I think it's never really malicious, but you can do it unknowingly by not addressing somebody who's a derelict in your group because you think that they're a regular, normal thinking human being and that they're just having a bad day. So I think you kind of have to call that stuff out or decide that that person's not right for the group and let them go if it's that detrimental.
I think there's two things that you're triggering me to think of. But first, I'll just say it looks like the leads have left the building. But um, if it's an issue with an individual in a group, then that's, I think, the one where you talk to the person in private.
Yes,
But if it's an
definitely.
issue with group dynamics, so let's say a group is just, something triggers and a couple of people go at it and how everybody else behaves. And sometimes as a leader trying to deal with it in the moment, it just backfires on you.
Yep.
But if when the group reconvenes after you've had maybe some sidebar one-on-one conversations to get context and understanding, well, before we get started on the agenda today, I really would like to reflect on what happened last time, if it's
Yes.
okay with everybody else. And everybody, even though they don't want to, says yes to humor you. And then you kind of say, well, let's talk about it. And here's my perspective. Tell me why I'm wrong. And then let the group kind of talk it out.
Yep.
And then that sets the tone that like debate is acceptable. Like, let's talk it out. I really want to hear. Just because you're the leader, you might not be right because it's your subjective view of what occurred. But it has to be addressed because you know what? Ignoring it doesn't go away and it only gets worse. And then it undermines the whole idea of people feeling like they can speak up. They hold it back. They're just like, hey, let's get done what we got to get done.
Yep.
But then it doesn't get done well. And it's not really a team. It's just people doing individual tasks that happen to kind of get pushed together.
Yep. Absolutely. And let's face it, most of the time the leader is not quote unquote right because your job is to collect information from a bunch of people and you're the final decision maker on something. You're the person who is accountable and responsible for the decision. So if you've not asked your team or your group questions, then the decision that you're making is probably a half-baked decision.
Yep. And it just reminds me of I was working with someone who thought like, hey, I'm doing everything right on this team. I give time for questions, etc. So all I had to do was observe one time and I said, you aren't asking any questions. Like, what do you mean? I do not end a meeting without asking any questions. I said, yeah, at the end of a meeting, it's over already. And you're saying any questions.
Any
I said, why
questions? Are
not
we
like
done yet?
right, like
Right?
periodically, like you just have kind of create segments. Like at the end of the segment, go, what are your questions? Now people are going to assume you really want them because you just said, what are your questions? That means I have some. I just find that one, and even for me teaching and doing training, it has completely changed everything that I don't
Right.
do that typical question and answer at the end. Any questions? No, everyone wants to go home. We're done. No, what are your questions? But ask it periodically and I leave time. Like I'll just go, what are your questions? And then I just wait. And of course, like hold my fingers to stop myself from talking.
Yeah, that segment piece is real important because before you shift to another topic, make sure that the first topic is understood. Once I learned that, it was a game changer, you know?
Yep. Absolutely.
So I'm trying to figure something out here. So Benita said, she might have to go off camera for a minute because she needed to get the door. Then Bobby goes off camera. Then a little bit later, Benita goes off camera. Then Bobby comes back, and then Benita comes back. So I've got to conclude, based on the available evidence, that Bobby went to Benita's door. Benita, answered it, to let Bobby in for a minute, and then he came back, and then she came back.
Yeah, we're having a
I was just
cousin get
saying-
together.
Yeah,
So
I
the
was just
lesson
saying she
of the
wanted to go
story is
golfing.
they had a little private sidebar about the four of us.
It looks like it.
It does look like it, doesn't it? Too funny. Lucia is here. I can't tell because it says LinkedIn.
Oh, maybe she's one of the LinkedIn users.
Lucia. Yeah, she must be. Thanks for coming, Lucia. We're gonna have to have you here too. Lucia Santamar.
I'd like to see her and Robert Barry on a panel. That'd be a good panel.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh wait, who is Lucia? I don't think I know her.
You've not met her?
I'm showing
Maybe
up as
we
a
can-
LinkedIn user.
We're gonna have to
We're gonna make an introduction.
So Benita, you were going through ticking through some of the ones at the end of this section on vulnerability, and you were getting ready to come to one that I just really love, and it's one
Okay.
I'm not good at.
Oh,
And so if I may, I'll steal the control for a second and just
Yes,
read
please.
this. So I am on page 163, and it's in conversation. Resist the temptation to reflexively add value. And I'm not good at it. I always want to have the last word. I always want to add my 2 cents. I know it,
Yes.
and I do it on these things every week, and here I go again. But it says the most important part of creating vulnerability often resides in not what you say, but what you do not say. This means having the willpower to forego easy opportunities to offer solutions and make suggestions. Skilled listeners do not interrupt with phrases like, hey, here's an idea, or let me tell you what worked for me in a similar situation, because they understand it's not about them. They use a repertoire of gestures and phrases that keep the other person talking. One of the things that most often is probably the simplest thing to say is say more about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Number one,
That's gold to me.
it's gold to not, when we're listening to someone, like I have a few rules, and one of the top 3 are don't solve their problem while you're trying to listen. And don't remember the time it happened to you, because it didn't. It's happening to them. Just listen to it. And a lot of times people don't want it solved. Don't tell me how to solve it. I just wanted to talk about it. But it's hard to keep back because you hear it and you go, you just want to fix it, especially in a workplace. You hear it, oh, I know how to fix it. Let me just give them, do this, this, and this, and it'll be done. But no, that's not really what will be best. It's hard.
I'm with you, Hal. That's a tough one. I used to be terrible at it. Now I'm just okay with it. But that's a big one.
Where I never get it right is the relationship with my wife. I can never still figure out, am I supposed to solve this or am I just supposed to listen? I never can figure that one out. I get it wrong every time.
I started asking. Yeah, and I set the precedent. I said, okay, I'm going to ask. Do you just want a listening ear or do you want the problem solved? And you need to be open and honest enough with me to tell me. And she tells me. So
Yeah, I just asked too.
But there does tend to be, when women offer what's going on with them, where they might just be venting, generally, and I'm stereotyping, men just want to say, oh, but all you have to do is 1, 2, and 3, and it'll be fixed. It's like, I didn't want to know.
No, just do 1. 2
I
or
just
3
wanted to
extra.
vent.
You don't need to do that. Just do this. It's simple.
look, Leslie, it's okay to stereotype. We are natural fixers. We just, because we view everything as not everything, most things as a problem to be solved. Okay, we don't want to talk about it. We have very little going on up here because we don't multitask well either. So we can only handle a few things up here at a time. So if we can solve one problem and get it from up here, we're good. We're like, yeah, that's gone. We don't like a whole bunch of stuff rattling around up there.
Well, you take the stereotype and then you take the chosen profession and that's just a double whammy of taking a male auditor who knows there's only one answer, and there's only one truth to everything.
But when
Oceans,
I
what the hell is
really,
that stuff?
I was completely with you, like, because I'm a problem solver. But when I realized that to stop doing it is when I was managing this group of 50 people, and people would come in, kind of dump the problem in my lap. The quickest way to deal with it so I could get back to what I was doing is, tell them how to fix it. But then I realized they keep on coming in. Like, I couldn't stop them from coming in. And I finally realized, you know what, maybe I should just let them like vent, talk about the issue, and then look at them going, well, what are you going to try? And then
That's the old
finally,
monkey. Yeah, the
they
monkey jumped
stopped
off their
coming
back
in the
onto
door.
yours thing. Hmm.
And they were learning how to solve problems too, maybe differently than I would, but they were, at least now I was able to do my work too. And they were feeling better about it too. But it took quite a few years. I was lucky to be in that situation at the beginning of my career.
Yeah,
It really
being
taught me
an
to stop.
being an auditor taught me that just sit back and ask questions, because they'll most likely solve the problem themselves, and they'll
Yeah.
solve it better than you because they're closer to it than you. And so, during my career, I was really good at doing that. And I helped people a lot by just asking simple questions. And then they would solve the problem, and then I would take all the credit. No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't. But I think Sia hit it. I can solve my own problems. I most likely created it.
And
And
also, if you solve it yourself, like, I mean, you feel better about it, but it's likely that it's like more durable because
right.
you're doing it, you're figuring it out, and now you're going to go take care of it.
Well, you're
And
So,
also not vested to the solution if it's somebody else's idea. So if it doesn't
yeah,
work, it's their fault.
there you go. I read
that's true.
this I read this
Sometimes that's a
one
good way.
I read this one book many years ago. I can't think of the author or the name of the book, but it was about asking questions. And the author made it a point to say that people are more apt to solve the problem if they come up with the solution themselves. That's why you ask questions. And I was like, oh, I remember I was just starting out in the audit career, and it was a physical book, which those still exist. And I remember reading that, and I started thinking, wait a minute, it's a great way to work. Hal has some.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a prop.
Yeah.
It's a
I think that short pause before you try to solve goes a long ways. I know I worked maintenance before as a copywriter for 12 years at a industrial plant, and they would call when that plant would go down and you were expected to go running. And I remember one day I was eating lunch and I thought, I'm not going down there till after I finished my lunch. I had about 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, they called me back and they says, never mind, we got the problem fixed. And I thought, wow. I thought, hot damn. So then the next time they called, I thought, well, I'm going to wait 10 minutes and see what happens. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, they called back and they said, hey, we got the problem fixed. So I do the same thing at home now. If my wife's venting or if the kids need to vent, I'll sit and just listen. I thought, I'm going to give this a good 5 to 10 minutes for them to get whatever they're upset about, whatever they're venting about out. I'm just going to listen before I even attempt to solve. And sometimes they solve their own problem. I don't even have to worry about it.
Here's what I learned by doing that, by just asking questions or just waiting and not providing the answer. Oftentimes, people won't even come to you. They'll try to solve it before they come to you because they know that you're going to put them back in this loop of trying to solve it themselves. And then at work, at least, you create this group of independent thinkers and workers, and it ends up working out in your best benefit.
Definitely.
But it's almost like parents with children, right? Parents who coddle their children too much end up having children that don't move out until age 50. Whereas
Yeah.
whereas
Yeah.
those who teach them to be independent, they end up, leaving at an appropriate age and time frame.
Well, they move out. They move out at 22, but they come back at 24, and then again at 26, and eventually that last iteration is at 50. But
I wonder if I'm going home at 50. Now you got me wondering. Oh, Jose thinks that maybe the book you're talking about is The Five Dysfunctions, no?
Nah, that wasn't it. But that is a good book. I've read that one too.
Yeah, that's an
Okay.
awesome book.
Back in the day when I was still reading. No,
I have
Anything Lencioni does, I'm a big fan of.
I have Business Bullcrap by Robert Berry here.
oh boy.
Yeah. Overcoming craptacular counterproductive practices that kills cultures and pummels profits.
Ooh, that's a lot of alliteration going on. What was that guy thinking?
I like it.
Me too.
Oh, it's an okay book. Just okay. Not my best work. It was from 2012, I think.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, originally. Yeah, and Sia's right. The ones that figure it out are the badasses. Yeah. Or at least the ones that come to you and say, listen, here's a problem. Here are the things that I've tried so far. You know, I appreciate and respect those kinds of people better because the ones who just come to you and say, here's a problem, oftentimes those are the people you need to fire. And what they're doing is I call it dropping poop on your doorstep because they're just coming to you with a problem and poop, they're just dropping it for you to step in it without giving it some thought, telling you what they've done so that you all can actually collaborate. But yeah, I find that those people tend to be the best people.
Definitely.
And a lot of time you find that with new supervisors and new leadership, they get a lot of poop dropped on their doorstep because the team wants to see what they're made of. So they'll purposely get bags of poop dropped on their doorstep with no solution, which I don't necessarily think is right. I've just seen it over and over again at different workplaces.
Yeah, I'm scooping that poop up and putting it back on your doorstep. I mean, yeah, but you're right. People do try to test you out, and I don't put up with that nonsense. I think it's crap because the leader doesn't necessarily have to know how to do everything. The leader is supposed to know
Exactly.
how to utilize the resources that are at his or her disposal, which means you are a resource. So if you do something better than me, have at it. Let's go. Let's use your strength because 9 times out of 10, if you're good at something, that means you like to do it. So why would I keep you away from doing something that you actually like? And why would you want to be pulled away from something that you like and possibly put on something that you don't like? That just makes no sense to me.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like how the author mentioned what you guys are talking about. Make the leader occasionally disappear. Several leaders of successful groups have the habit of leaving the group alone at key moments. One of the best at this is Greg Popovich. Most NBA teams run timeouts according to choreographed protocol. First, the coaches huddle for a few seconds to settle on a message. Then they walk over to the bench to deliver that message to the players. However, during about one timeout a month, the Spurs coaches huddle for a timeout, then never walk over to the players. The players sit on the bench waiting for Popovich to show up. Then, as they belatedly realize he isn't coming, they take charge, start talking amongst themselves, and figure out a plan. The best teams tend to be the ones that I wasn't involved with, especially when it came to training. They would disappear and not rely on me at all. They were better at figuring out what they needed to do themselves than I could ever be. So that was directly like quoting what you guys were just talking about. And that's how the chapter ends. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
But I think you're pointing out too, in a more abstract way, that this book is one where I think, Bernita, you've come to a similar conclusion that I did. Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, a lot of his research to come to the conclusion he came from the research he did, and the research he did is based on these stories he's telling. And if you resonate with a story, read the story. If the story isn't working for you, you can skip ahead because he summarizes the action steps he proposes from the culmination of those stories at the end. So there's still the value is there. I just, I think it is, as Abel would remind us, you don't have to read every word in the book to get the benefit of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So
It's
do I really think
interesting though.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's interesting. Like there's a point where everyone lately is always talking about tell your story with stories. And then in this case, maybe there was a little bit too many stories without a little more analysis.
Right. It's the analysis, I think, that was missing. Yes. So I say a boot. I don't say about.
Oot in the boot.
You say a boot with the best of them.
A boot.
I want to know which golf course that is, Bobby.
This is one down in California. It's just a picture I pulled up quickly before our live I did yesterday. I thought I need a golf picture, so
I like that. I like that.
it reminds me a lot of the course that we've got here in town that's currently covered by 1.5 feet of snow. But hey, that means green grass this summer, so you can't complain too much.
I think I was on that course. Is that me behind that tree there looking for a ball?
It might be. Just don't hit me in the back of the head.
No worries about that unless I'm not aiming. If I'm not aiming, then I'll hit you. Yeah, of course.
I'd hit you even if I was aiming because my aim is just that bad.
So now that we've come to this conclusion, Avel, about this book, I wonder what I should do about the next third of the book, which is establish purpose, and it's skill number 3. So skill number 1 was create safety. Skill number 2 was share vulnerability. And skill number 3 is establish purpose. Wow, all sorts of spoiler alerts here.
Yeah, well, I think the established purpose, I think, follows the same pattern as the other sections. But, the purpose piece does resonate with the previous book we just did, The Heart of Business by Jolie, because, that is all about having a sense of purpose, both for the company and as you as an individual.
Right. Spoiler, no, not a spoiler alert, but a small plug for Ron Carucci, just because he came and showed up at the book club. He's going to be at the Purpose Summit. So purpose, I think, might be the next buzzword of the business world, like, what is your purpose? Why do you do this? I guess it's already been a buzzword, but they're Jolie and The Heart of Business, Ron Carucci, and To Be Honest, were entire books about that. So it might be a review for me too. Avel, how should I read it? Just do a little review, and then we're off to our next book, aren't we?
I need more time to read Chip War.
Yeah, exactly. I wish my Amazon worked as fast as yours, because I still don't have my next book. So the next book is going to be Chip War by Chris Miller. And it's a little bit of a, thank you, Hal. It's a little bit of a turn, a little veer off our usual leadership, self-development, and business book, but a little bit, I wouldn't say that. Hal, could you give us a short description?
No, I can give you a description. I cannot necessarily advertise it short because I have no idea what I'm going to say right now. So here's my improv.
Okay.
So I'm I'm about a third the way through, and I'm going to need probably a couple of weeks to get through the rest of it. It is extremely educational. It is extremely important, because the computer chips and the things that power our lives through chip technology, we don't really think about much, but it's drawn to the parallel that it is, and it was even talked about in the book as early as the 80s, 1980s. Some visionaries were already seeing computer chips as the next oil in terms of importance, not only to us as a society and as a globe of individuals, but in terms of the relationships between global partners and adversaries. And so it works through some of the stuff about how the chip industry started, the visionaries, Moore's law, and how the doubling down every certain period of time in terms of the power of the technology and the miniaturization of it. And it starts going into the global competitions, the military, and how it started to realize that the future was relying on chip technology, and how the military started to get involved. And I'm on the part now where it's talking about how the changing relationships between US and Japan started to evolve because of chip technology, and how much the Japanese society had become so skilled at efficiency and effectiveness in terms of how it was mass producing things. So how much we talk about it, I'm not sure from the first third I've read, but it is a fascinating read. But it's going to get to the point where I think it's going to, bring us more current to today. And I think that there might be some, more richer things to kind of talk through as it brings us more to current events type things than history. So that's my off the cuff improv answer to your question.
Yes, that's where I was hoping that the conversation would come from, is the lead in to current events. Because I mean, we all know what these semiconductor chips are, but do we really know enough about them to be intelligent in what we are reading in the news, and these wars that are going on over technology and all that. So I think you're right. I think it's going to be a fascinating read, and I hope that you guys join in on this one. It's going to be a little bit different, but a great lead in to trade war, chip war, commodities, supply chain, and something that like all of us have and use, like in our phones, in our laptops, coffee makers, TVs, everything, right? Cars. What do we own that is really like a life improvement machinery that doesn't have a chip? My fridge.
I mean, during the pandemic, why was the U.S. car manufacturing industry basically put on a complete standstill? And it was because of the supply of chips that were coming from outside the U.S. And why is Congress debating a chip act right now? Because it's trying to find a way to pull more production of chips to the U.S. because of the reliance that event demonstrated to us, reminded us of how important it is to our own economy and our own jobs in the States.
Right. So there's going to be a lot of talk about chips. So get ready, like bring the salsa. Tell us your favorite kind of chip, and it'll be fun. It'll be fun. I would like the audience to like go on and on about chips that they're eating.
I was going to ask, can you put a microchip in the microwave? Like, how does that work?
Oh, true. Well, I don't know if there would be a chip war going on there, because the chips in the microwave might not like other, Yeah, no, never mind. I don't know where I'm going with that.
Then
But
you
if
have
you
a
try that
flag.
experiment at home, give us a little, give us an oral report on that.
A boat. Oh, I say a boat.
A
A
boat?
boat. A boat.
It's a boat.
Yeah, it's a boat. I say that. I don't say a boot.
You don't say a boot. Oot in
No,
the
I
boot.
say a boat.
Well, I don't think I'll be putting my chips in the microwave on a boat or anywhere else.
Mhm. Yeah.
But do you put salsa on them though? That's the question.
Of course, salsa and cheese.
Ooh, and guacamole.
Oh,
Okay.
And guacamole.
Super Bowl coming up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Chicken wings, chips, salsa. We're gonna have it all.
Little Smokies.
Eagles by 6.
Oh wow.
I knew it.
We're calling it
okay.
Okay, Eagles by 6. Any others?
Yeah, I think Eagles, but I think it's going to be an interesting game.
Yeah.
Well, I do think one of two things is going to happen. It's going to be close, and the Eagles are going to win by less than a touchdown, or Kansas City is going to blow them out. They're just going to start hot, and then there's no stopping Kansas City if they're hot.
The
Yeah.
Chiefs. I like Bobby's hat. Show them your hat.
I'm just there for the food. I watch hockey.
Right. Bobby's got the Calgary Flames on his
Everybody. Yep. Everybody
So,
asks, who are you
interesting
going for in the
Super
Super
Bowl.
Bowl? And I tell them the Calgary Flames.
Any takers on those bets?
They say that's not.
I'll take the Flames. I'm in.
They say that's not an NFL team. I say I know that's the point.
So I posted about this a few days ago on LinkedIn, but an interesting fact: what was like the big rage in Super Bowl advertising in the Super Bowl last year? It was crypto ads.
Oh, was
Crypto.
it?
How many
Oh,
crypto
yeah.
ads will you see in this year's Super Bowl?
Zero. Not a
Every
one.
last one of them pulled out post the FTX debacle.
Right.
And the big
Wow.
stories about it now is that the beer companies are all salivating because this has created space for them, and yet they're still selling most 30-second spots for $6 to $7 million.
Wow.
They've been completely sold out on Super Bowl advertising spots for a while. But
So you know what this means? This means that we're going to get some more talking frogs, high fives, or Clydesdale horses.
there's nothing wrong with that. It's certainly better than, Brady pushing, FTX or something.
Oh boy!
Not that didn't happen. Did you remember the commercial from last year that was supposed to be a parody of Larry David, who was the creator of Seinfeld and other sitcoms, and the parody was basically he was saying that that's never going to work, and it was supposed to be a parody that it was the rage and all this kind of stuff, and it turns out that the parody was
right.
truth.
Funny. Well, everyone, gather your chips. Get the book Chip War by Chris Miller, and
So
enjoy.
Culture Code one more week, and then Chip War starting the week after.
That's exactly right.
Got
Culture Code one more week next Thursday, and then the Chip War starts right after. So it's going to be a good one, guys. I always say that.
So are you ending Culture Code early? Is that
No.
it?
No, that's what we had allocated for Culture Code is 4 weeks.
But today is the night.
I think I think Avil's pointing out that we're 2 weeks in, so next week would be 3. But I think the way the book is structured, it works out well to do.
I didn't realize that.
That's we did the 2nd, and now's the 9th, so we'll do the 16th, and then we'll flip over.
I thought this was the 3rd week, but I was wrong. So
And And it's shorter too.
And it's
Yeah.
shorter, right?
Well, that's okay. Go on to the other one. I think we're struggling with this book. Usually
Yeah.
the conversations are a lot more vibrant and move fast, and it's not happening.
Okay. I like that. Let's do it. So, culture code, one more week, chip war next. Okay. Have a happy weekend. And Eagles in 6.
Go Flames.
See you.
That's right.